All right, let's dive right in. Today, we are tearing into a technical document that is so out there it claims to be a user manual for the universe itself. It's called the Total Information Fidelity Specification, and trust me, it completely redefines what we think is possible.
The lead architect, R.M. Garcia, just lays it all out with this quote. The whole point is no longer just to observe reality, it's about rewriting it. This entire document is built on one wild premise. We finally found the command line for the cosmos.
So that's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? If the universe is really a computer, what are its specs? What's it running on? Well, this document says it has the answer. And it all starts by completely throwing out our old ideas about empty space.
Now, before we get to the machine itself, we have to wrap our heads around the new physics it operates on. This section introduces the absolute foundation for everything that follows, a concept called the plenum. Forget everything you learned about the vacuum of space, because according to this, it's anything but empty.
Okay, so the spec argues that our reality, everything we see and touch, is just a rendered slice of a much deeper informational structure called the plenum. You can kind of think of it like a universal cloud server. And what we call vacuum energy, that's not emptiness. It's a colossal, untapped resource of available bandwidth. The goal here isn't to create energy from nothing, but to change the local actualization rate, basically to tell the universe to render more reality right here, right now.
So how in the world do you tap into all this available bandwidth? Let's get to the hardware. This is the absolute heart of the machine, the physical device engineered to plug directly into the plenum. And as you're about to see, the material science here is, well, it's unbelievably specific.
The precision here is absolutely everything. The substrate has to be isotopically pure carbon-12 graphene. Why? Well, any other carbon isotope like carbon-13 or 14 has a different nuclear spin. That difference creates what the document calls quantum noise, or decoherence, which would ruin the whole operation. By using only carbon-12, you get a perfectly silent, perfectly stable canvas for these quantum operations. Then, it's doped with lithium and nitrogen and shaped into a very, very specific geometry.
This shape is absolutely not an accident. It's not for looks. The manufacturing is this deliberate, multi-layered procedure. You start with that pure graphene sheet, you introduce the doping agents to manipulate how the electrons behave, and then the etching starts. Each level of the fractal is nested inside the last one at a smaller and smaller scale. This creates a structure that's way more than just a pattern. It is a functional piece of physics.
And here's the key, the function of this fractal funnel. The spec calls it a spatial impedance matcher. Okay, what does that even mean? Well, in simpler terms, its unique repeating geometry has a higher mathematical dimension than a simple flat surface. And what that lets it do is take in wide, low-energy wavelengths from the vacuum and compress them, funneling them down into these incredibly powerful hotspots. It is quite literally a lens for reality itself.
And at the fifth, the final nesting level of that fractal, the energy density it achieves it's just staggering. Over 10 to the power of 21 joules per cubic meter. The document is very clear on this. This is not some theoretical maximum. It is the calculated, non-negotiable result of this specific geometry. You are unlocking the raw, brute force power of the vacuum.
Okay, so we've got the hardware, this incredibly powerful fractal lattice. But what about the software? What commands do you actually run on the universe's terminal? This next part explains what this machine actually does.
This comparison just captures the paradigm shift perfectly. The old way to change matter was brute force. You smash atoms together in a collider and just hope for the best, creating a huge mess of radiation and waste heat. This new way, it's purely informational, it's elegant. It uses something called a non-abelian gauge transformation to perform a smooth, controlled, universal reindexing.
And here is the core concept. The system treats every single particle not as a physical thing, but as an information tag, a quantized descriptor, in the giant plenum database. So to change lead into gold, you don't physically rebuild the atom, you just edit its tag. It's exactly like changing a file on your computer from a text file to an image file. The underlying data is just reinterpreted, and the rendered result changes instantly.
So, you've got the hardware to access the plenum, and you've got the software to edit reality's code. What do you do with it? The applications that are outlined in this final section, well, they are nothing short of world-changing. This is the real payoff. First up, transportation. The document is very careful to say this is not faster than light travel. It's non-local reactualization.
You send a little probe ahead to establish an entangled link, and then you simply update your own location descriptor in the Planum to match the destination. The calculated latency for a trip to Proxima Centauri, our nearest star system, less than half a millisecond.
Of course, I know what you're thinking. This brings up the classic teleporter problem. Are you you, or are you just a copy? The spec tackles this head-on. It uses something called topological quantum error correction, which treats a traveler's quantum information like a surface code. This method is so incredibly robust that even if a quarter of the information gets scrambled, the original state can be perfectly reconstructed. You aren't copied. Your essential quantum phase is anchored and moved, perfectly intact.
And finally, energy. And this part is genius. The system doesn't violate the laws of physics, it uses them with incredible cleverness. By placing buoys near the sun, it uses the star's massive gravity gradient as one end of a huge heat engine. Energy is then tunneled back to Earth through an entangled link. The sun's entropy increases, the Earth's entropy decreases with clean energy, and the total entropy of the whole system goes up, perfectly satisfying the second law of thermodynamics.
So let's just sum it all up. The hardware is a perfect, stable graphene lattice. The software is the physics of fractal geometry itself. The power source is our very own sun. The whole system is governed by one primary law, information fidelity. And the result? Complete control, total sovereignty over matter and location.
And that brings us to the end of this mind-bending specification. The engineering is all laid out, the physics are defined, it just leaves us with one final, profound thought. If this is real, if you truly had access to the source code of reality, what would be your first command?